The worst scenario is a blank. And so obviously the sooner you get rid of that, it makes a big difference. And I've always said, if you can win the Supreme, the pressure's off you immediately, and you can really say, right, now we can kick on. And, you know, I mean, we were pretty strong going into the Supreme. You know what you've got. I mean, if you go back to Altior's, and, you know, I mean, he was unbeatable going into the Supreme. He really was. I mean, look, lots of things could go wrong. And you hear rumours from Ireland about what they've got and everything, but Altior certainly wasn't going to get beaten in that. I don't say we were quite as confident about it this year. And to be fair, Shishkin, I mean, he is very good. And he won despite a pretty troubled passage. Things didn't go at all well. Even Nicky said the ground was probably plenty soft enough for him, which it was on the first day. It did vary a little bit throughout the week, but it was very hard work on the first day. We knew that was going to happen. I mean, we'd been going to Cheltenham. I'd walked the course on the Sunday before, and it was still saturated. I thought it was very, very soft in places. And when you've got these very, you know, very speedy horses that have very good changes of pace, very soft ground almost certainly doesn't suit them. You know, but they can't. They're not sloggers. I'm not saying the others were, but we had a pretty strong team with Shishkin and Chantry House, who I'd probably say I would have preferred to have run him over 2.5, but then we'd have bumped into Envoy Allen, which would have, that was probably the one horse to be avoided, in fairness, at the end of the day. And Allard actually ran a great race. I mean, they finished first, third and fifth. So it was a strong hand to play in the opening skirmish.
Do you see all three of them going chasing next season?
I wouldn't be so sure about Allard. I think he's unfinished business over hurdles. Shishkin, I think Chantry House certainly. Shishkin, we'll just have to have a look, see. But Joe Donnelly, who owns him, he's the most lovely man. He's very quietly spoken. He doesn't show up a lot on television or anywhere. Do you know what I mean? And he just says, "I'll leave it all to you." He's got those horses with Willie Mullins as well, as you know. He'll only say, "You do whatever you like." The main thing is he managed to win the race, and the two of them, Abracadabra and they pulled a long way clear of Chantry House, who was a very good horse in his own right. We know that. And they did come a long way clear, despite having sort of through, well, it was actually Joe's other horse, wasn't it? And that was where his class came in.
And you've already mentioned Altior, your previous winner of the Supreme. Would you put Shishkin in the same bracket at this stage?
I think he has an enormously high future. I can't say he's unbeaten because he actually had a fall at Newbury on his first run over hurdles, which was, I mean, that hurt like nothing on earth because I think everybody just thought this was a certainty, and he just second hurdle and he stepped at it and fell. Luckily none the worse anyway, so otherwise really he should be unbeaten. He's very, very high class, yes, touch wood. He's come out of it fine. I very much doubt we'll be doing anything. Well, there's nothing to do again. You know, we'll come on to Punchestown in a minute, but I can't see him going there.
When would you expect to make a decision about chasing or hurdling next season?
Well, I don't know, as I say, there's not, you know, like in the days with Altior, we sat down in here with Christopher and Pat Pugh and Nico 3 times, I think, during the summer to discuss whether to go hurdling or chasing, tossing coins and guessing this and guessing that. Luckily, I think we came to the right decision. But it was a close one, only because I said, look, he would win the Champion Hurdle. Do you want to win the Champion Hurdle or take up a chasing career? And we went the chasing career route, which we did the same year with BUVEUR. And in fact, BUVEUR won his first 2 steeplechases, so did Altior. But then BUVEUR wasn't going to beat Altior over fences. But I did say, look, but he will win the Champion Hurdle. I want to switch him back, which luckily they, you know, JP and the team agreed to doing, because I wasn't going to switch Altior back, who was actually a year older, so it was more important for him to stay that way. Shishkin, I'm not going to tell you that he should stay back over hurdles, because he will win the Champion Hurdle. I'd be pretty confident that Altior could have won the Champion Hurdle the next year, but equally so that I was that BUVEUR was improving fast enough to do it himself. So luckily we called that one, by pure fluke, we called it right, and consequently won the Arkle and the Champion Hurdle. So we've got to, you know, that'll be the dilemma for this summer, I suppose. She became a sort of quite a firm favourite after her performance in the Christmas Hurdle, and everything had gone right at home, except for we did have a couple of days where we had to come out. She coughed for 2 days, and we had to make a statement that she was, and tell everybody that she was coughing, or that she was. We'd done a track wash and a blood, that all said she was perfectly all right. But in the current day and age we're in, if it coughs twice, you've got to tell the world. And actually, having announced that she had coughed for 2 days, she must have read the paper, because she stopped immediately. And all I'd done is cause chaos in the Champion Hurdle market, and there was nothing wrong with her. But that's the way of this world. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. But that's what we have to do. 1 minute, Epatante is coughing, and Altior's great. The next minute, Epatante stopped coughing, and Altior's lame. So you can imagine what it's like. It's not a lot of fun. And of course, poor old Altior didn't make it. But it certainly tests me. I suspect it would test any trainer, would admit that when you're into those sort of preparations before meetings like this, that it's scary days. She's come out of the race really well. She was never going to, I mean, we discussed it that weekend when, as far as we knew, that there was all racing was going to, we were on the assumption that all racing would go ahead. And I briefly discussed things with JP, and we, you know, what various horses might do. And I said, well, the one thing I wouldn't want to do would be to go to Aintree with Epatante, because the Aintree Hurdle is 2.5 miles. And I had no desire to go over 2.5, especially only 3 weeks after Cheltenham, and that if she was going to go anywhere, she'd go to Punchestown. That, obviously now, knowing what we do, Ireland have said they are going to continue to race behind closed doors for the time being. There's no guarantee that that'll go on. They'll get as far as Punchestown. We love going there, and the whole idea is that's where we were planning that Epatante could go there. We're going to have to see what we do. I mean, we had without the Grand National, OK Corrals, found himself with nowhere to go, but luckily he's in the Irish Grand National, so he has already gone to Ireland. On the grounds that they have said that at the moment, but with no English horses. Now, I don't know whether that's for the, you know, while they're just running sort of the day-to-day races, or that's going to include the likes of the Irish Grand National or Punchestown. Consequently, OK Corral has already gone to Ireland in anticipation that English horses would not be allowed to run. Well, he's going to be trained in Ireland for the Irish Grand National. With Epatante, she is here and she's staying here. JP said, no, she stays here, whatever, so, which is very good of him. If they say there's no English horses, then she won't be running.
Do you see her as a hurdler that could dominate the division in the same way that BUVEUR has the last few years?
Well, the first thing is we'd love to see BUVEUR back, and there's every good reason to hope that he will be. I think everybody will, well, not everybody, but that saw the images of the injury he had, which was about as freak as you could ever see. And the only thing you learn from that is that there are things that happen in a year, that 40 years now, that you bump into something that you could scarcely believe could happen. You certainly haven't seen before, in that he wedged this piece of hurdle right down through his coronet band under the hoof, virtually came out into the pedal bone at the base of the hoof. And they consequently had to cut out a huge piece of the whole of the front of the hoof to get all the woodwork out. So now he's got to grow a whole 2 inches of hoof, got to go back across the front of it. It's going slowly. They do say that the healing of a hoof speeds up a lot with the warmer weather and the summer, and I suppose it's a bit like trees grow in the summer, and hopefully hooves do too. They tell me they will, and it'll speed up quite considerably during the summer. If it does that, he will be back, and he's the rightful. He was the well, he fell last year. I think this is the amazing thing, and I was talking to Martinstown, JP's stud and the team over there, that the enormous credit that they must take, because in the space of the last year, they won the Champion Hurdle last year, because BUVEUR fell, but they had another horse in the race that wins it. And that sadly died at the beginning of this season. So BUVEUR is he sets off to the fighting fifth and actually gets beaten, but it was not a very satisfactory race, apart from the fact that actually not only did he get beaten, he's come back with a piece of wood wedged in his foot that he can't, that's the end of his, that's a year out. But hopefully he'll be back. But the fact is they've lost the previous year's Champion Hurdle winner, the year before, and the year before that's Champion Hurdle in BUVEUR. And yet, you'd think that's a crushing blow, but believe it or not, he's still got another rabbit in the hat, which is Epatante. So, as I say, it's a pretty fair testament to the quality of the team at Martinstown and JP's team, that you can be collecting horses of this calibre to the point that you can actually win the Champion Hurdle with what, at the beginning of the season, would undoubtedly, and probably not even that, third string. And, it was great. I mean, she'd been good. She started the season in a second season handicap at Newbury, and I wouldn't think a horse has come from there to the Champion Hurdle too often. And yet she just had the one run in the Christmas Hurdle. I was never going to run her again before the Champion, and she was great. She was foot perfect in the Champion. I mean, Barry gave her a beautiful ride. He had a lovely run through. He was always in the right place. Her jumping is very slick. Where she goes from here, I mean, the interesting thing from this year's Cheltenham, I think you'd take, is that the mares look particularly good. In the two in the mares' hurdle would be, and I'd be pretty sure if we went to Punchestown, Honeysuckle and Bernie de Dieu, I could see it being very much a girls' race. I'd say they'd be the best three in the race by quite some way, I would think.
Just briefly, a quick word on your other runners in the Champion Hurdle. Pentland Hills finished 9th, just behind Ballyandy again, and FUSIL, RAFFLES, Call Me Lord. What were your thoughts on them?
Well, to be fair, they were probably all a bit disappointing. FUSIL, RAFFLES has been an enigma this year now, and Pentland Hills. They were the two best four-year-olds of last year. We all know that the four-year-olds have a notoriously difficult time in their second season, and so it proved. FUSIL did come out and win the Unibet Elite Hurdle, wasn't it, at Wincanton. He made very hard work of it, horrible ground. Then he stopped very quickly in the Christmas Hurdle, which Epatante won, and we freshened him up for Cheltenham. But he hasn't, you know, he's disappointed all year, to be honest. I thought he was going to be a star, as I did with Pentland Hills, who actually ran 2 very solid races in the International and the Champion Hurdle trial at Haydock. But in both times, though, on both occasions, it looked as if he was going to come and win easily, and didn't quite see his race out. Luckily, Call Me Lord was in the International at Cheltenham, which he managed to capture. We're just trying to, you know, now everything's come to a standstill. We're a month ahead of the end of the season, effectively. So we're now going into the period of time where we check everything out. And if there's anything to be done, mended, repaired. We cauterized his palate, Pentland Hills's, which it does only take a week. That's easily done. It's possible that he needs more doing to it, but that was only a hunch. Nico felt that he was making a noise at Cheltenham, in which case we might have to go further and do a bit more. But we've got all the time in the world to do that now. Well, it surprised me as much as it probably surprised everybody on the racecourse, if you like. I mean, everything looked to be going fairly well until after 3 out, and he was just, you know, he wasn't going as well as those 2 horses were up front. And then after the second last, look, we looked certain to finish 3rd. We were well clear of the 4th, but the first 2 had flown. And they jumped the last together and they'd gone. And I was rather dejectedly having to settle for 3rd place. And I actually, towards the end, knew that he couldn't get caught for 4th, he wasn't going to win, went to watch what was happening up the front. And I was watching the 2 front horses, and all of a sudden, Champ's head sort of appears in my because I can't see everything. Our vision isn't great, but I couldn't believe that all of a sudden, Champ suddenly roars into the picture, goes between them like a knife through butter, and well, he's just going to go further and further away. It was an extraordinary performance. Whether they'd gone a bit hard up front and probably just caught him for a bit of toe coming down the hill. It was his first run over 3 miles. It purposely kept him to 2.5 all the way through. And he was learning well until he had that horrible fall in January at the second last, when he was going to win comfortably. If he'd have won that day, I wasn't going to run him again. Then I wanted to run him again, but there was nowhere to go. The ground and the weather and everything was wrong. We took him to a racecourse for a good school. That went well. And I mean, I'm the first to admit he's got to brush up his jumping. It's been the same all the way through. It's good, and it has to be good to be winning any of the races you won, let alone the RSA. Luckily, he was very good at the last, and that's what sort of got his momentum going. And I mean, I've already sort of talked and discussed with JP and others that what I would propose to do with him come the autumn to make sure that we come in more accomplished. He's gone home to Martinstown already. We had no intention of running anywhere else again, had there been any racing. So he's safely home this morning. He's just got to get slicker and a bit more accurate. I mean, to be fair, we left him in the Stayers Hurdle all the way. Well, I mean, not until the declaration, not after Declaration Day, 5 days before we didn't. But we had him in the Stayers Hurdle the whole time, which probably tells you that we had a little overlying worry about his jumping, and especially after that fall. Therefore, that if the schooling hadn't gone well and that racecourse school hadn't been satisfactory, we had him in the Stayers as a backup and would have had no hesitation in switching him back to hurdles had it been necessary. Luckily it wasn't. We felt it wasn't necessary. We were happy with the schooling. Barry came and schooled him a couple of times, and the one person who still really loves this game is AP. And he spent a lot of time with us through the winter. And when we went for that schooling session, he was in the car with me, driving along beside it, watching it. He was actually videoing it for JP. And to be fair, he's been a very big help to me on the ground. And he comes nearly every schooling. Well, I mean, it's great. He doesn't actually say, I'll come down in the morning. He's here. And I enjoy having him here, but because he's another pair of eyes and with a good brain that can see what's happening, and I don't say be critical, but you know, could be constructive and helpful to us all. And you know, he's keeping JP in the loop. I mean, it's extraordinary. I think JP has sort of an eye in the spy in the sky, because I mean, I promise you, that day he schooled. He went round on the racecourse. I mean, no, Barry was on the phone to JP before he got back to AP and myself. JP had rung him. Now, how did JP know? It's the second time he's done it, that when we've been doing racecourse gallops, he's actually rung Barry before we've even spoken to him. So how on earth did he know that gallop had finished in that 1 minute that it takes him to get back from where he's pulled up to us? It's spooky. I think JP knows, he knows, listen, he loves it. And that's the whole, you know, he can't wait to hear how these gallops, and whether it's Champ or Epatante or the other horse, you can't wait to hear how it's gone. And I mean, that's the great thing about him as an owner. We're very, very lucky. We have some lovely horses for him. He's a very, very good friend, and we talk a lot. And you know, he's not in the country for much of between Christmas and Cheltenham, and nor is he now. But I mean, we have good conversations every day, and he takes, you know, he loves the horses.
So has he got a route in mind? All roads leading back to the Gold Cup. Would he go to the King George en route?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, it's the obvious one. We'll have to think, but I mean, our most important job at the first place is going to be, I mean, he will be back at Martinstown. He will, Ger Kelly, who comes here again with AP at least once a month, checks all the horses out, and he'll be going there, and Ger will undoubtedly be, you know, have his spanners out, ready to correct anything. We've had no problems with him. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The horse has been pretty straightforward on that score to train. He's been a sound horse. We occasionally have to deal with this or that, but there's nothing structurally wrong. I don't think that's why his jumping is not as tidy as it should be, but I know they'll be looking at every department that could affect it to see if there's anything we can do to improve it. So Joe will be doing that while he's on holiday at Martinstown. And when he comes back in, I have a plan in the back of my head as to what I want to do. And I think it'll involve him going away to do some loose schooling and, you know, just to brush it up. And I've spoken to JP about it. And I've already actually mentioned it to Henrietta Knight, who will be where he'd be, you know, it's where I'd like him to go in the autumn, to go and have a, you know, a real, I don't say crash course, because that's the totally wrong word. The last thing I want is a crash, but you know, an intensive session of jumping, so that we're going to be slicker and better. And then I think he is a Gold Cup horse. AP, I know, has always said this is a Gold Cup horse, but that's probably actually to keep his son Archie happy, who's Champ's #1 fan, and it's lovely. And I mean, everybody knows why he's called Champ, and this name was sort of reserved until somebody came up with a horse that they thought was good enough to be awarded the name. So when they said, that's right, is this horse good enough? I said, well, I think he's pretty smart, yes, unnamed. then they put the pressure on us all by calling him Champ. Listen, at the moment he's living up to it, but there's a long way to go. As I say, if he wins a Gold Cup, then he has done, but that's what we've got to do, and he has the potential to do that, there's no doubt about it. I think, you know, from the second, well, just going to the second last to the last, he just lacked a bit of tactical pace and just couldn't quicken at the ideal moment. I mean, at one stage, you know, we all worried, well, Native River we would have all assumed would be making the running in the Gold Cup. When it was announced that, you know, sadly for them, that he wasn't going to make it, the big question was, crikey, where's the pace going to come from? Because you always know you've got a natural pacemaker that you probably can't even catch, but you know where a good gallop's going to come from. Bristol de Mai didn't seem to really want to force it this time, which probably led to a slower pace than might have suited us, because it enabled the others to quicken. And going to the last, he just couldn't quite find that gear that they had. And so landing over the last, he's actually got a considerable amount of work to do. And to be fair, unless he was going to find a Champ-like turn of foot that I didn't know he had, he wasn't going to get there. But consequently, he couldn't get between the two horses, which was the telling moment, because then he did have to come round. But to be fair to him, once he'd got round and got galvanised again, he did run on very, very strongly. So he is a good stayer. As I say, you could have had a stronger race. You could have actually had softer ground than it was, believe it or not, because they had a lovely strip of very, very good ground kept for the Gold Cup, which hadn't been used since last year's Gold Cup. And it was probably every bit as good as he needed. I mean, run it a day before or one of the earlier days, but that's on a different track, to be fair. Yeah, it might have suited him better. But no complaints whatsoever. We were all thrilled with him. It was only his sixth steeplechase of his life. And I know Album Photo had, with his preparation of that, is masterful, because, you know, he knew exactly what he was doing. He was only going to have the run at Christmas. We were doing it our own way. He wasn't over impressive in that intermediate chase at Sandown, but we'd kept him back. He was never going to go King George. And we were always going Cotswold Chase and then hopefully into here. So the plan worked within reason. And I mean, it had been a dream of Richard Kelvin Hughes's to breed a Gold Cup horse. And, you know, we've been together a long time. I trained the mother, Tina Goodnight, and she was a right old rat bag, where this horse has the most fantastic temperament, who wants an enormous amount of work, but tries his heart out and jumps and gallops and does everything that a Gold Cup horse ought to do, and he's good at it. As I say, he's not a speed horse by any means, but he's a really, really good, old-fashioned Gold Cup horse stayer.
With that in mind, him not being a speed horse, Kempton was never on the cards this year. Would you be inclined to avoid the King George again?
I think quite possibly. He was third in the Feltham the previous year. And again, really it just looked if Kempton was a tad too sharp for him. But again, he came out and was great. And he ran a fantastic race in the RSA last year when his preparation had gone to pieces. We got help, as you remember, the flu epidemic. He had to get revaccinated, which meant he couldn't run in the Reynolds at Ascot, so he had no prep race. Then we had a problem with his feet, which took us right up to the last day. I don't think he was ridden more than once or twice in the last 10 days before the race. So how in the heck he managed to finish? He only went down very narrowly to top of the game. who sadly he came out of this year's, you know, he's got to come back for next year's race as well. So he's going to be an interesting contender next time round. No, that was a real good performance in the RSA, and so we knew he liked Cheltenham. The hill was always going to suit. Well, the verdict really was we hadn't got a clue what to do, and I was only messing around. I mean, he was in the waiting room for retirement, but I didn't want to retire him. But there were quite a few of the guys. Look, we've had great fun. It's been terrific times. He's not what he was. Let's call it a day, which was very understandable. Nico and I were just, I don't say messing about one morning. We'd finished schooling, and I got Mike Bite out there. I said, right, we're going to do something. Actually, there was another horse of Simon Munir's that we were thinking about the cross country with. So Darryl was on Valtor and Nico was on Mike Bite. Instead of schooling them over the fence, I said, right, let's go and have some fun. And we jumped some hurdles going that way, and then they didn't stop. They just turned in and jumped 5 fences. And then they turned out onto a piece of ground we have at the back where actually when the children were all pony clubbing and all that sort of thing, we had some cross-country fences and telegraph poles and ditches and tiger traps and all sorts of things. And I said, go on then, off you go. I think they looked at me rather surprised and thought I'd lost the plot. Well, I thought Mike Bite would dig his toes in and say, you must be joking. Valtor I thought would be brilliant. Well, actually it turned out to be the other way around. Mike Bite was just, he thought it was really good fun. And they just went all around the place, jumping all sorts of different things. And so it sort of gave me an idea. And I talked to all the owners, and I said, look, I'd like to take him to Cheltenham to have a practice, which you have to do. It's sort of compulsory. Before you can run in the cross country, you have to actually go there and show that you're capable and safe and sound to take this sort of test on. And he loved it. And so we took him back again a week later, and Nico said he was just even better. To be fair, there were 2 things against it. One is that you're going in first time into the big one of the year, so you're meeting all the best horses. And secondly, it was heavy ground, which he hates, and it was heavy. And the grass, through no fault, not Cheltenham's fault, but because it was so wet, they couldn't get the machinery onto the track. I mean, the grass was that long, and that was hard work too. But he still really enjoyed himself, and to be fair, that was his best run of the year. And I was really saying, look, Nick, go out there, enjoy yourself for as long as he's enjoying it, and when he's not, that's enough. Because I think it's very hard to win one of those cross-country races at your first attempt at the cross-country. So go and get a couple of laps of experience, and that's what we'll do next year, which is what the plan is. He'll be going out in the field now, and we will bring him back next year to contest. There are 5 or 6, I think, during the season, 5 anyway, during the season. Unfortunately, some of them are handicaps, which is going to be difficult for him because he's so highly rated. I mean, obviously, Tiger Roll doesn't turn up in those either because he's too highly rated. But we might well go and have some. It was fun.
Is the Grand National under consideration next
Well,
year?
I mentioned that to Nico. It's certainly not, well, obviously not this year. You never know. I mean, all sorts of things could happen. I mean, Nico actually really thought he wanted to come back to less than 3 miles. And Henderson goes and runs him over 4. So, you know, normally we sort of agree on these things, but on that I actually do beg to differ, Nico. I think he is a genuine stayer. Well, that was the most frustrating part of the whole week, and it was tragic. It was tragic on 2 scores, really, because 3, what was billed as the race of the week, with 3 proper 2-mile chasers, with Altior holding the crown, and we thought he was in fantastic form. And you've got Defi de Seuil, who's been, you know, he'd been having the best of it in England, while we were sort of recovering from that dreadful dusting that both Surname and Altior got at Ascot, which was a calamitous race in my opinion. I mean, we shouldn't have run. It was only the situation. I mean, if I'd have withdrawn him on the morning of the race, which I should have done, I would have had to have a police escort to get me off the racecourse, because the whole world had been looking forward to this clash of these two great horses over a distance he'd never tried before, and what turned out to be absolutely horrendous ground. And it literally, we got about as near as the bottom of Altior as you could possibly get, and I have a feeling that it had pretty much the same effect on Surname, and we just had to put him away and wait and wait and wait. There was no question of going to anywhere. He just wasn't. He wasn't a happy bunny at all. That had absolutely cooked him. But we got back in time for the game spirit. We had one little problem with an abscess on his wither that affected him, but we got to the game spirit and he was good. He didn't impress everybody, but he did what I wanted to do, and his work after that was excellent, and his schooling was frighteningly good. So we thought everything was, literally, we were all set for what was going to be this great race with Défi de Seuil and Chacun pour soi. And we're the first out. We got this splint, nothing I could do. These are just one of those things that rear their ugly heads from time to time, but they have a horrible habit of doing it at the most inconvenient time. And this certainly was inconvenient. Never been a problem all his life. It's been there all along, but it's never interfered with him. And as hard as we tried, and we did everything we could, I couldn't get him sound. And consequently, we had to, we told everybody what we were doing, but had to draw stumps at the end of the day. Still, there's going to be Chacun pour soi and Défi de Seuil. And then, on the morning of the race, Chacun pour soi is out with an abscess in his foot. I mean, you couldn't believe that could happen. I mean, evidently he was perfectly sound in the morning when exercising on the race course, and he was lame by lunchtime, which left what you thought Défi de Seuil with what would have appeared to have been a very easy task. And it just shows there's no certainty in the game, because I'm afraid Défi wasn't Défi on the day, which left Politologue, who's an honourable gentleman of the highest order, but I think Altior's met him 5 times and beaten him 5 times. So it did make it slightly more aggravating than it might be. It might have been only 3 times they've met, but I mean, or 4. I can't remember, but I mean, there's only ever been one result. And it did make it all the more frustrating, I must admit, to see a horse that you can beat whichever way you want to do it, that wins it. Well done to them. They were the ones that were fit and well on the day, and for John Hales and Paul, it was the horse. He'd won some good races, but he'd never quite been because of Altior, he'd never quite had his day in the sunshine. So, I say it was a disappointing race at the end of the day for quite a lot of us.
But Altior's okay again now, and he'll be back next season over 2 miles. Touch
wood, obviously with him. Yes, I mean it'll be 2 miles. I mean, had there been Aintree, and he was okay, I'd have had no worries about going 2.5 at Aintree. That wouldn't have worried me one iota, and I would have liked to have done it. But that's then all over, and we're not going to go to Punchestown, so we'll put him away and just hope we're all. No, it will be. I mean, it is. Well, I say it will be. I mean, Simon Sigg had terrible bones. Simon Sigg. He was a very brittle horse, and he suffered dreadfully from splints. And we had to operate and do all sorts of things, and but I don't, I'm seriously hoping the X-rays on Altior's splint itself shows absolutely there's nothing to see on that. So it's just naturally one of those, just a really annoying little bony pimples that, reacted at exactly the wrong time.